Hey, hey, here we are, gentlemen. How's it going?
Good, man. How are you?
I'm doing all right. We're at another week of our podcast.
This is
Yes,
Week number 6, right?
6.
Sure.
Yeah. Last week was a big episode for us. I have to admit, I was really surprised by the turnout that we got. We by far our most popular video, and I'm really happy because I could tell that it was a topic that we covered that is near and dear to a lot of people's hearts. So it was good to kind of branch out into something that to me was unknown, and I think those are the fun episodes to do, right?
Yeah. Thanks, guys, for the support. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. We appreciate all of you guys for watching our videos, for sharing as usual. It means a lot to us. It shows us that what we're doing is relevant. So we thank you guys so much for helping us, that way. So this week we have a new topic that we're gonna take on. It's the third part of our series, and this week we're talking about faith, and we're talking about, am I Christian enough? And this is a topic I think that for us, is going to be interesting, definitely, because we are people that have grown up in church, we've all grown up in church, and now we're at different places in our lives. And we kind of just want to go back and talk about these, about what it means to us, this idea of faith and so on. So with us, we have our friend Joey, who's back. Joey was with us for our second episode of the podcast where we were talking about, which one was that? Was that where we're talking about Brianna? Sorry?
Am I black enough?
Am I black enough? That's right. And we decided Joey was going to come back because this is going to be an interesting topic to get his perspective on. So welcome back to the podcast, Joey.
Thank you. And I've been in the sun since last time, so.
So now there's no questions.
It's blacker enough.
That's it. You're catching up, Joey. You're catching up. Yeah, and as usual, we have Gift with us and Dwight.
Yes.
Good to see you guys. Always good to see
you, man.
See you, man. Thanks for coming back.
Yeah, and just to let, sorry.
I just said thanks for having me.
Cool. Just to give everybody also a little update. So we do have another person who's supposed to be joining us a little bit later in this podcast. We're hoping that things are going to work out. We wanted to also get their perspective. We're going to introduce him when he's a part of the podcast, but we're looking forward to having this other person join us by the name of Randy. So it's going to be cool to hear from him too a little bit later. So I think, as usual, we want to maybe just dive into this topic. I have a little bit of an icebreaker question, and I'd like us to all maybe give an answer and give a small, maybe expand on it just a tiny little bit. So the icebreaker question is, Christians always think that they are, fill in the blank.
I don't think I can even answer that one.
No, Joey, look, you're on this podcast. It's called The Unashamed Truth. Therefore, You're not allowed to be ashamed. You can say what you need to say what's on your heart. We want to hear it.
All right. Well, I believe Christians are not a monolith, so I can't answer that question.
Okay.
They're always. No, I can't say Christians are always. Wait, so can you rephrase the question anyway?
Christians always think that they are, fill in the blank.
Blessed?
Okay. All right.
I don't know. I don't to make absolute statements, but yeah, I know a lot of people say they wish each other to be blessed. So.
Okay, that's an interesting take. I can tell Joey's he's still skating on ice. I want Joey. I want Joey to break the ice. It's called an icebreaker question.
Yeah,
Joey's warming up, guys.
Dwight, what's your answer?
Yeah, I'm gonna say Christians think they're always right.
Okay.
And my thing on that is that when it comes to they often come across as a group that doesn't have anything to learn.
Okay.
And we there's a lot that we can, if we open our minds, if we open our hearts, if we, you know, choose compassion and whatever else, right? The kind of like the staples, the quote unquote staples of the faith, right? There's a lot that we can look across at our brother and sisters and learn from outside of the community. You know, that's my. They think they're always right. That's my take.
Okay, fair enough.
Preach, bro. Preach. Christians always think that they are holy. They always think that they don't face any temptations. They don't think about bad things. It's always about the Lord is good all the time. I never think about bad things.
Yeah.
Always the good things. I never face struggles because the Lord is good all the time.
Okay.
I'm better than you because I'm Christian.
Ouch. That one hurts. That one hurts. I'm going to say.
I can honestly say that none of the Christians that I associate with in my social life are like what you just described, though. You know.
Okay.
I don't see either any of you guys being like that either. So that's like I can't. Like my experience with Christians are the Christians that I choose to have in my life, and they all like fantastic people. So it's hard for me to.
Okay.
You know, it's been a while. It's been a while since I've been in the scene. You know.
Yeah. You've kind of distanced yourself from the I guess the worst of it. Yeah.
Well, the core of it, I guess, but
yeah, that's it.
But the ones that have stuck around, the ones that are still my friends, are they're my friends because like they accept me and I accept them.
But you see, on your experience though, I want to say is kind of like the odd man out experience. Why? Because usually when Christians are with people that or around people that don't have the same values as them, they usually tend not to have friends or associates that don't have the same belief system. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I remember when I was younger, you know, there was a long time where everybody I knew, all my friends, you know, were all Christian. You know what I mean? There was nobody that was outside was outside of that circle, right? Yeah. That only changed as I matured, as I aged, and you know, broadened my, you know, my understanding of everything, right? But that tends to be the case, right?
Yeah. My experience was kind of similar to that too. At least for a number of years, most of the people in my social life were Christians.
Mm-hmm. So I think this is probably a good moment just to maybe have Joey explain a little bit about his like cheminement, about his I can't think of the word in English, but his trajectory. Just reason being because we're talking, but we know between us where Joey's at. But Joey, you know, to our guests who may not know him and stuff like that, it would probably be interesting for them to know just some of what where he's been in his life.
But hold on, before we transition, I'm curious to hear your statement, Terry.
I was hoping to be able to skip this one.
I'm curious to hear.
Good catch, Gift.
Man, I was trying to get out of this one unscathed. My answer is going to be kind. And that, to me, sometimes is the most damaging thing, is when you think you're being kind, when you think you're being sincere, when you think you're actually working from a heart of compassion, and you're not. Or you're doing it because it's what appears to be the right thing to do, but it's not really coming from a place of sincerity. And that's been some of the challenges that I've had to deal with in my relationship with people that are you know, in church bodies and in Christian bodies. And honestly, that's a little bit of why I, like I said earlier in another podcast, I tend to keep, you know, an arm's length. You know, I keep certain people at an arm's length. You know, I'm not saying all people. And the truth of the matter is, like Dwight was kind of saying, my understanding now is, people are people at the end of the day.
Mm.
Yes, we have a belief system. Yes, we have a certain faith that we share that's common. But at the end of the day, my relationship and my belief in God differs from slightly maybe from what you've experienced, and that's just human nature. I mean, no two people think exactly alike, right? So that's what the understanding I've come to now as I'm an older person with way more wisdom. But at a time in my life, I know that when I started to see that sometimes the kindness that people had was a superficial thing, that really bothered me, because my nature is I try to be as kind as I can possibly be to people in my surroundings. You know what I mean? And what I've always hoped for was to meet kindness when I give kindness, and that hasn't always been the case. But like everybody, I'm not perfect either. So I know that I have my flaws, and that's why I try to now say, well, I extend grace where grace is needed. Anyways.
Oof,
Yeah. So boy, that got heavy.
that was
Huh?
good.
Yes, that was a good catch. We almost missed that.
Almost missed that.
I'm trying to do damage control. I'm trying not to say something that's gonna get me in trouble. Okay.
That was deep, though.
Now the next question, and Joey, you can give us your observation on this one. The next question is: being a Christian means fill in the blank. Wait, you want to?
I was going to say first, we got some live comments coming in. I want to make sure we.
Yeah, we'll get to those in a sec.
Yeah, but no, come back to me. Come back to me.
Okay. Gift.
I remember her from like Emmanuel days, I think.
Oh yeah. Yeah, you went to school. Okay, cool.
That's
So
like
okay,
30 years
let's do the shout outs now. Let's do the shout outs now, and then we'll pick up the conversation. Okay.
Yeah, sorry.
So we heard from my sister-in-law, Lisa Gabrielle. So hi, Lisa.
Hey, Lisa.
She seemed to agree. Yes, congratulations, by the way. So this is my other sister-in-law, Lisa. She was saying that apparently she seems to agree with what I'm saying. Thanks. And then also we have Frederica Petitam, who reached out. Hey, how's it going? Nice to see you. Nice to hear from you. Thanks for watching the podcast. So cool. So, Gift, did you want to go, or Joey, who wanted to answer that question? The question was, being Christian means fill in the blank.
And well, I can speak to what it was like, what it was for me when I during the probably like the middle of my faith, I guess. During my most fervent, which would probably be in a period of my mid-teens, and then like another period in my early 20s, and the period where I went really hard, like in my early 20s, is also kind of I had like dueling, like I was really trying hard to be faithful and to be involved in ministry and to like keep on that path, and my doubts and everything were like kind of pulling in the other direction.
Mm-hmm.
And but during my mid-teens, I think it was a good period where it was like representing everything,
Mm-hmm.
It was just like, it was my life, it was my identity, it was my community, it was my social life.
Mm-hmm.
It was and I believed in Jesus, so I was praying regularly. I had regular conversations,
Mm-hmm.
like that. So it was during that period of time, I don't know if I could say it felt real, but I put a lot of effort to keep it real, like to keep it alive.
Yeah,
I get that.
And so that was like a concerted effort, but not a concerted. It was a deliberate effort, but it was but I made it what it became.
Mm-hmm.
I just couldn't keep it up forever,
I get you. That's I think a lot of people can definitely relate to that. I've had moments where I've had my extreme like cool, like I'm into this 100%, and then I've had moments where it's been challenging for me personally. And what's going to be interesting, I guess, is that for me, I wouldn't say that I would walk away from believing in God, let's say, but I've had to walk away from the institution that is church.
Mm.
I've had to take moments to turn away from that, because for me it was like, so okay, y'all really think you're different than people, and you're convinced in your minds that you're different than people, but what I'm seeing on display here is exactly what people are doing anyways. So it's like, so for some people I've almost felt like saying, listen, cut yourself loose of the guilt, right? And just live your life, and just be who you are and be authentic to yourself, rather than coming here and beating yourself up for feeling like you're not good enough, like you don't amount to being Christian enough for the circle that you're trying to adhere to, and live your life, um and for me, what I've had to do is I've had to dose it, so I've had to say, okay, I believe in God. That's not going to be changing in my life. But the relationships, my belief in God is gonna mold the relationships I cultivate with people. So I will try to be understanding at times when people are being difficult, you know what I mean? And say, okay, look, I hope to experience grace, from God. Therefore, I will try to extend grace to the people in my surroundings. Now, it doesn't mean that I will always let myself be walked over, let's say. There comes a point where you have to say, okay, enough is enough, and that's just knowing to set your boundaries as well, too. And that's what I've had to do actually in my church life is set a lot of boundaries, and say, okay, I'm with you to here, but I'm not going to cross this, like I am not going to hold a sign that says anything negative about people who may have a certain sexual orientation. You know what I mean? Not to say that I've ever been at a church where they've asked that, but if I see a conversation is leading towards something that could be harmful to people, on account of who they love or how they dress or whatever, I'm just like, listen, that's not for me. Like I am going to be just real with people. That's all I can be, Oh, we have a good question here. So we have somebody by the name of Anne Bear who's asking, question for all of us. Do you think it is possible to be a Christian without believing in God?
I'm going to answer this question by saying this. There are a lot of Christians that don't believe in God and don't realize it. I'm telling you right now. There's because of the journey that I've gone through in my personal life, what I've witnessed is the doubt that people have that they don't know how to contend with. So instead of confronting that doubt, they choose to assimilate. So they get deeper in the traditions, they get deeper in the sayings. They get deeper in all of the the pomp and circumstance of what it is, but really and truly they don't believe. Because if they believed, their actions would be different. Their ability, their desire to let me explain. Their desire to reinstate people that have fallen from ministry, let's say. Their desire to, fix relationships, their desires to do XYZ, right, would be more at the forefront if they believed. But they're happy to be part of a community. They're happy to be part of, a community of people that, that say hi back when you say hi, right? So because of all of those trade-offs, they're happy to be in the community. So there's a lot of people that are walking around in this state, right? But if they were honest with themselves, they don't believe.
So
they're just going through the motions.
Definition of Christian allow for like disbelief in my understanding from in like how I grew up, like salvation, which is what would like when you're saved is when you identify as Christian,
Mhm.
is when you believe.
Oh, yeah. Now, you see, if we get into the the mechanics of it, right? The definition, the biblical definition, the biblical statements of these things, right? This question is not possible.
Right.
It's
Okay.
not possible to have a person do this. However, they in what you observe in reality are people that identify as this.
Yeah, that do not believe. Yeah. Okay.
You know,
So
Yeah, to
That would have been me for like at least a year or so.
Mm.
Like, I guess officially.
You're gonna say gift?
yeah, like to add on to what Dwight was saying, I think it's possible to be Christian and to be involved in rituals, like Christian rituals, whether it's like baptism of like your kids or what have you, like Thanksgiving dinners, Christmas dinners, like those could count as like being air quote Christian. And you do not necessarily believe in God, but you're believing in the rituals of Christianity, which label you as such, right? And then you could believe in God and still not ascribe to being Christian.
okay. Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. The reverse is also true. That's it.
Yeah. So that's my take on that. And
Yeah, and I think I relate to the latter part of that statement. Like in the sense that like, church culture is a thing I struggle with. You know what I mean? For certain reasons. And like you said, though, I think that's exactly it. You have people that perform all of these rituals, that go to a church and say amen on time, and they sing and they clap their hands, and they seem
those Bible verses.
they can quote the Bible verses, and whatever, and that's cool, but like the when the rubber meets the road, that's where things are different. You know what I mean? And they operate without kindness. And to me, it's so funny because when I read, like, when I read the Bible, and I've read the Bible and I've listened to the stories and all this stuff, and I see the moments, especially like if you look at what to be a Christian means, it means, being Christ-like, and if you look at who Jesus was, according to Scripture, Jesus was a person who was kind, a person who sat with the people that needed him to sit with them and build them back up. That's who Jesus was. And then so when you see in a church context that people will be literally who Jesus was opposed to, which are the Pharisees, right? And you're like, yo, like, did you not understand this? You know what I mean? Like, and the thing about it too, that this is the biggest part for me, at least, is Jesus met people where they were at.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? He didn't, he got off of, the donkey and went up to a dude that was sitting in the tree and said, yo, come, like, let's talk. You understand what I mean? Like, that's how Jesus was. He went to the people who needed him. He went to the woman at the well. He didn't tell the woman at the well, come over here, I need to talk to you. He went over to where she was and had a conversation with her. You know what I mean? And that's, to me, the understanding of who Christians should be, is that they should meet people where they are. And instead, what we like to do, I include myself in this, is we like to stand on our firmly and say, we're not going to try to go and meet these people where they are, because we don't believe that they're within we should reach out to them. If they want to find God, they should come to church. You know what I mean? But not, I'm going to come and meet you where you are.
Do you feel there's an element of wanting to protect the community by being like that a little bit? Like in the Bible, Jesus befriended prostitutes and people that society kind of looked down upon.
Yeah.
And in the church, at least in my experience, those people, unless they're coming to you, like unless they're coming to your soup kitchen and then you make them sit through a sermon or something, they how do I put this? I'm just drawing a complete blank in mid sentence.
But I get where you're going with this, and I think this is the example I could give personally.
Well, sorry, can I just take it?
Oh yeah. So, no, go ahead.
Before I lose it again, I'm just wondering, because I was asking you the question, like if you feel it has a little bit of that, like the influence, like maybe Jesus could have felt, yeah, I'm gonna hang out with this prostitute, but I'm not gonna do anything. Like I know what I'm here for,
right?
And somebody else might say, you know what, stay away from prostitutes. They're dangerous. They'll pull you out. They'll pull you down or something, And I've always wondered felt like there was a bit of protecting yourself from what people consider to be the dark things of the world,
Yeah, there is, and that exists. And I remember, this is what I was going to say, in case you had forgotten your thought, is I remember like when we attended youth, there were people that when they showed up at youth, there was always a little more tension, like these are the people that were kind of not blacklisted, you know what I mean? But like, they would get weird and right, you know exactly what I mean.
I know exactly what you mean, man.
I can almost give a list of people who went to our youth group would know these people and be like, shoot, and the worst part about it is that now that I'm a grown man, okay, and I see these people, I'm like, man, like, and we chit chat, we talk, and I'm like, man, I can't believe I sided with the people that kind of dismissed you. You know what I mean? And that's the thing about it. That's bull, in my opinion, man. It's trash. We're so quick to just discard people. And then the worst part about it, man, is when like so like you're in a church that causes these rifts between friendships, families, even kids that like because maybe their dad doesn't go to church and mom goes to church, they distance themselves from their dad and stuff like that. And then all of a sudden you find out, so and so that's a board member of the church has been having an affair for 20 years on his wife or something like that, and it's like, you know how much that messes up people, when they've lost like connections with their family because they're adhering to this church body and they're trying to live to these standards, and then they get to they start to distance themselves from their family, then only to have some nonsense like this happen. It's like, anyway, sorry, sorry, bro.
You gotta, I'll add to Joey's statement in this talk too, by saying, listen, man, for a long time I went around preaching, the most marginalized group, one of the most marginalized groups in the church community are divorcees. People that, man, it's like, it's hard, right?
It is.
And because you're blacklisted. You come in, you're blacklisted. Yeah.
Comment from,
go ahead.
Sorry, a comment coming in from Lisa along those lines. It's not Christ-like to blacklist people, and that's what we tend to do in the church.
Yeah.
Carry on your point.
And I had people that being a divorcee in the church, I had people had that gained the courage to say things to me like, we won't ever take relationship advice from you, and just other crazy comments like that that not only cut, but it's like, how can you then turn around and believe that Jesus lives in you and you're able to make a statement like that, right? You know what I mean? And it's not even coming from somebody that is an elder, right? It's coming from a quote unquote peer, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, we tend, what I've witnessed a lot in church, being on two sides of the fence, being somebody that was way on the inside, like that guy that so many people would come up to after the service to say, hey man, you got any plans? Let's go, to being the other side of that coin, right? I've lived life on both sides of that. I've lived out my faith on both sides of that line. I could
Just
easily.
gave me a flashback with Kelsey's. Sorry.
Oh yeah, come on now. Come on. How many Kelsey's? After service Kelsey. Let me tell you, when I was blacklisted, there was nobody calling me to go to Kelsey's. I can tell you that right now.
I remember that.
Okay, and some of the most Christ-like moments I lived were from people that were quote unquote outside of the faith. Right. I'll never forget. And, Joey, I'm glad that you're on this podcast, so I can thank you for this publicly today. But I'll never forget the day you came and you talked to me and you told me that, that you didn't believe anymore and that you were walking away. And then walking away from the faith, but, you didn't want that to mean that you were walking away from our friendship and this and that.
Mm-hmm.
Then fast forward, a year or so later, and I'm now divorced, and my son's birthday is coming up. I remember nobody wanted to come to his birthday party because nobody wanted to be associated with that guy.
I remember that. Oh man.
So here's Joey slapping together a quick birthday party and pulling together a cake for me and my little man.
And my ex too has got to take some credit for some of that too.
Yeah, come on. Yeah. Mandy was, was perfect in that moment, and I remember I was welcome, and we had this party for Aiden, and he didn't care; he was just happy, right? Mm. And I'll never forget that. You see, this is what leads me to say what I was talking about before, right? There are people that walk around as Christians, but they don't believe. And because of moments like this, if they believed, they wouldn't be able to treat people like this. You understand? They wouldn't be able to, they would refuse, they would see Jesus and see an opportunity to be like him. Instead, what they are more concerned with is, will this action lead me to look like someone that is counterculture, right? And they're more concerned with fitting in to the what looks the part, rather than taking rather than taking on the action that actually is the part. Because you see, Jesus is counterculture, right? He is the one that associates with the people that are down, that are low, that are down on their luck, that are the rejects of society, right? And by associating with those people, that is counterculture, right? So that's the that's the aspect of it that is missing, and the reason why I answered that question that way, a moment ago.
Yeah, thank you, Anne, for the question. We really appreciate it. And she also wrote back to say that she appreciates us digging so deep into the question. So it's cool.
That was a doozy.
Yeah.
Thanks for reminding me of that, Dwight. That's a good memory too. Well,
so let me just say thank you very much.
Hey.
Thank you very much, Joe. Thank you, Mandy. Thank you for showing us the love, and I often refer back to that. I tell my wife that story because y'all were there when my brother was down, and I really appreciate that.
The door is always open. If there's any downness, hopefully there won't be any more downness. But if ever there is, the door is always open.
Now we're just celebrating. Now we just celebrate.
Yes, that's right. Thanks for sharing that, man. That touched me.
Thank you.
Yeah. Joey, I'm curious. For you, like, what drew you away from the faith? How did you transition away from? Yeah.
So that's a difficult one to answer real quick, but it kind of, how I got introduced to Christianity really was when my father converted, when I guess I was about 6 or 7 years old. And, I think my mom was always a Christian, but it wasn't like a thing that we discussed really in our house much. And I think I remember her taking me to church once or twice, like when we lived in Ottawa. But it wasn't really a thing, and I didn't really come up like hearing about God or praying or anything like that. But then when my father became a Christian, then my house became like a Christian home, and then it just like switched, you know. And I guess there was a like I guess possibly maybe a difference between my brother and I is that I was the first like 6 or 7 years of my life, like it wasn't even a thing that I ever thought about, and then all of a sudden it was all we talked about in our house, and then the rules changed, and like we just kind of got immersed into this new culture. So I guess even from the start, like I went along with what the grown-ups were saying. I believe that the grown-ups knew better than I did.
Right.
But there was always an element of doubt. Like I don't know, And I remember at some point, my dad told me to. I had a bully. Like when we first moved to Quebec, I had a bully in my school, and this guy was terrorizing me like all the time, And at some point, my dad was kind of telling me, like, he was trying to give me a message about not fighting, and this was all new to him too. Like he wasn't involved in Christianity before this, or much, if at all. And so he started reading the Bible and like getting lessons and stuff, and he tried to teach me about turning the other cheek. Right? And he said, well, the Bible says if you turn the other cheek and if you return like cruelty with kindness, it's like heaping coals on their head. And if Jesus says to turn the other cheek, and he's like, just pray, pray for the guy, pray for your bully. So I was praying for him at night. I'd pray that he'd turn into a Christian, and I pray that he would stop bullying me. And then the next day I went into school, and he terrorized me just like usual. I tried the whole turn the other cheek thing, and it was too. No, I had to get out of there,
Right.
At some point, I remember like praying, and okay, so this is gonna sound pretty silly, but I didn't realize. I thought you had to close your eyes and clasp your hands to pray. I didn't realize. Like later on, like other Christians would just, like we'd be in church and people would just have their eyes open and, everyone prayed in their own way. But I thought you had to go like this.
Right.
So when this guy I would see him in the schoolyard, I would see him and I would like go like this real quick, and I would like be like,
oh no.
And so he would catch me like that, and he would laugh his head off, and then he would give me the beats. And at some point I was like, well, this doesn't work. Like, am I doing it wrong? Am I getting it wrong? Like, what's the deal? So that's some of my earliest memories, And then I would be in Sunday school. Like, fast forward to like I'm about between 10 and 12, and the Sunday school teachers would get upset with me with my questions, And I always felt like I had legitimate questions, and they were treating me like I was being a shit disturber. Oh, sorry. Like I was trying to push things up,
Yeah.
And I felt like that stuck with me too, because I'm like, what, like why? How come the question I have, how come it's not bothering you? Like, why don't you want to find the answer to this one too? And but it was just things. I guess it was on subjects like they just kind of wanted you to just accept it for what it was without like digging too deep, And so like that kind of all those questions had to do with things that I had doubts about.
Yeah.
And it was just like, oh, when I bring this up, people are they either react like negatively to me, or they tell me things that don't satisfy me. Like my father would say, well, when you have doubts, you're supposed to memorize scripture and like do like what Jesus did when he went into the desert, and he allowed Satan to tempt him, and he just kind of responded to all the temptations by quoting scripture from the Old Testament to him, And I couldn't understand how quoting or memorizing verses and stuff like would help with my doubts. I was like, well, I still have the same question. Like one of my questions that angered the Sunday school teacher was like, why did God when we did Noah's Ark and the flood, the Great Deluge? I said, why did he have to do it that way? Like, like that's like the whole world had to die? Like, why couldn't he? If he was kind of unhappy with what he did, like, why couldn't he just blink an eye and make him disappear? Why did it have to be so violent? You know, I might not have phrased it that way at like 12, but like my teachers, like they did not respond well to those type of questions. You know.
Yeah.
And then when I asked some other people that I just didn't. I found the answers were like they gave me their answer, and I guess they were satisfied with it. But I always just was like, I still have it's still nagging in the back of my head. It's still nagging me. Like nobody's given me, you know,
an answer that was satisfactory.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, so fast forward, like that, my whole like thing started like that, but you know, my family got really immersed in the community, which meant I was immersed, and then I started learning how to play music. So music got me like it really hooked me, and actually the church was where I developed as a musician. So I mean, I definitely have an appreciation for it, that its contribution to that part of my life, because music is very important to me.
Yeah.
Then if you fast forward to when I was about 17, that's when I decided that I was going to try to, I realized at that point, like, oh, like I've been going to church now for like, well, since I was a little kid, and I don't think I ever read the whole Bible, you know, like we always had like passages, and there was always like daily breads and things that would guide you what to read. So I said, well, I'm just going to start in Genesis and I'm going to end in Revelation. I started doing that at 17, and my discipline wasn't so great. It took me about 4 years to read it, but I read it from cover to cover. And by the time I got to the end of it, is probably around the time that I had that talk with Dwayne.
Okay.
Maybe that must have come actually a little bit later. Oh no, that's true. No, I'm wrong with the time. I finished reading it a few years before I kind of came out about my disbelief.
Yeah.
At least you read through it, so you could say, okay, you know what, I've read it. Don't believe it. I'm gonna put up a comment here that came through from Mino, and I'm going to show this because I don't want to dive too deep into it. Okay, but it is something that I've been reading about and I've been learning about. But yeah, essentially that there's many parts of the Bible that have been either removed or are missing, and that have been kept secret and or hidden. And I think that's that's something that I don't want to sound like I'm a conspiracy theorist or anything, right? But that's something that I definitely paid attention to. And if you think about it, I mean, like, there's no the church didn't even hide the fact that they were trying to use this book as with an agenda. I'll put it that way. You know what I mean? And that's something that, you know, that's what makes me say I rather focus on my relationship, you know, that I personally feel I'm cultivating with God, than getting into these semantics that people fight over, you know, because especially I remember when I was younger, I had a friend who was a Jehovah's Witness, and I was just like, I remember we went to war, you know, about like our books and what our book said, and you know, the Bible says this, and your book says that, and blah 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 blah. And the worst part about it was it didn't amount to anything positive.
Didn't they have the same book though?
No, their book is
their Bible's different.
Their Bible is different. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I thought that.
And they put emphasis on certain aspects. They have certain beliefs that differ and vary from I don't want to say mainstream Christianity, but from, I guess you'd call it the Protestant.
Yeah.
We accept as the core of Christianity. Anyways, but not to detract too much into that, but it's just, that's something that, like, even there, that has put me on, and especially, you know, we're gonna take this into a path that's more along the theme of our podcast a little bit. But even when you look at culturally what the Bible has been used to justify, you know, and I'll never forget that moment when I was in the movie theater as a young chap on a date, and we're, you know, perfect date material, 12 Years a Slave. And you know, and you know,
could have done better than that.
My man, the plantation owner, is walking around, you know, reading to all of his slaves that are in their Sunday's best, and he's, the day before was cracking the whip, and while he's cracking the whip on their backs, reading pages from this book to justify his abuse of these people. And that is something that, if you're not careful in church environments and in church communities, if you're not careful, there can be abuse, or there can be manipulation, and there can be guilt tripping. And those are the things that can create such unhealthy relationships. And a lot of people that I know, sadly, a lot of people that I know that grew up in church have hit walls and hit points where they realize that some of what happened in certain contexts, not all, but some of what has happened has been damaging to who they really are, and myself personally, it's been in taking time away and trying to understand and figure out where I am personally and what my belief is about God and everything like that, and just recentering myself and saying, look, I know I'm not a perfect person, therefore I won't expect perfection from anybody. I'm just going to try to believe that people's hearts can be changed, but I'm not going to be the one to do it necessarily, and I'm just going to present the best side of myself that I can, because that's what I would want people to do for me, Anyways,
So,
and that sounds like a completely compatible person to me.
Yeah.
Anyone of any faith who has that attitude is easy to get along with.
Yeah. Thank you, Joey. I appreciate that.
That's it.
Yes.
So with that said, do you guys think that the current church culture is exclusive to specific demographics?
Yes. Absolutely.
We already covered divorcees. So.
Yeah. Divorcees.
I know when I was growing up, I felt like it was, like being a kid, like being told that like God doesn't want you to be disabled. He wants you to walk, right? So I was like, oh, maybe I don't belong here because I'm the only person in the church. My brother and I were like often the only people in the church who were who had a visible disability.
Right.
And we always thought like, oh, maybe they're right. Maybe we we need to walk in order to be accepted by God,
Yeah. You guys, just give me 1 second.
Yeah.
Randy is with us.
Randy's in.
Yeah.
Oh, Randy's in.
Hello, guys.
Hey, Randy. Hey,
Sorry, I
thank you
just
for
had
joining
to
us.
come up there.
Yeah, no worries. We're getting into some topics about the Black community and Black culture within church. Okay.
Okay.
Just to give you a little update, but here we'd like you to. Gift, would you like to do the introduction of Randy?
Sure. So hi everyone. This is my friend Randy. Randy is a minister, but not only a minister, he's also a stand-up comedian, a pretty good one too. And I'm pretty excited for him to be here and to share his experience about like him being a Christian and growing up in the church, and also how that even intersects with his like part of his profession of being a stand-up comedian, and how he reconciles that. But Randy, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you
today.
for being here, Randy.
Hi, Randy.
Thank you for having me.
So cool. So Randy, tell us a little bit about yourself. So you're a stand-up comedian.
Yeah.
And
So, yes, exactly. I was a comedian first. The ministry stuff happened unexpectedly, as they tend to happen in life.
Okay.
But yeah, my parents are originally from Congo Kinshasa, the DRC.
Okay.
And I grew up in London, Ontario, Canada. I grew up in a ministry that's a little bit different than your traditional church community.
Okay.
Our ministry has home fellowships around the world, and that's what we do. We don't necessarily meet at a church. So we're a group of home fellowships. So growing up, I always had fellowship in my home for the most part.
Yeah.
So I was around that, and that's how I learned God's word and developed. But as children, I had my own views, my own beliefs, until later on, I kind of aligned myself more with what the word says. But so I grew up, and then my whole life, I started doing stand-up at 14 years old.
Okay.
So
Like
it's been a big, it's been a big part of my life. It's like next to God, it's my passion. It's like right there.
Yeah.
So so I got into that, and then really what made me join the ministry in terms of becoming a minister was when I moved to Toronto to pursue comedy more seriously.
Yeah.
It was what's the word? It was a little bit of a challenge for me to reconcile like my career, how I was going to become a professional comedian, and my faith sort of thing.
Yeah.
I didn't know how to go about it.
Okay.
And eventually I just got like really more into the word, and I made the decision to become a minister, but my life is balancing the two. That's really how it happens for me.
Okay. Now, this is when Gift told me that you're a stand-up comedian. Now, I love stand-up comedy. I'm a big comedy buff. I listen to a lot of comedy, and I have no filter as to how far I've taken it. My question is, how do you set the boundaries as a Christian comedian? As a Christian who's also a stand-up comic, like how do you define how far you will take a joke?
Yeah.
I'm running up, and many talks about this. I'm cute. Yeah.
It's very difficult because, to be quite honest with you, my sense of humor and what I enjoy might be a little bit more cutting, a little bit more controversial, and let's just say not clean in terms of what my humor is. That's just being honest.
Okay.
That's what I find funny.
Yeah.
And those are the sort of comedians that I enjoy.
Yeah, I get
But in terms of balancing it, I know that I'm representing God. I'm representing God's people. So in terms of how I present myself on stage, there is some filtering that needs to happen. I need to be able to take the word of God and how a leader should present himself and use that as my standard, even though the joke that I'm thinking of would probably work. It'd probably be hilarious.
Yeah.
But in the grand scheme of things, what's truly important? Getting the laugh from that few people, or really what's important in the grand scheme of life?
Yeah. Okay.
What's the reason you feel you have to filter yourself? Is it just like to protect the church community from kind of, or is it just keep?
Yeah, it's a little bit of that because I have to be an ambassador, a reflection of the community, and also ultimately of what the Word of God says as a minister. That has to be what I show forth as, and what I want to show forth. It's not even like an obligation. I want that aspect of me to be really what people see when they think of me. So when I present myself on stage, I have to align how I'm presenting myself with what I think is the most important aspect of me. To be honest, with family and friends, I can lose that filter because they know me, and and they just have a different rapport with me where I can be that intimate and that. But for other people and not to be a stumbling block, I need to be able to have that dignified seriousness in that aspect of my life, if that makes sense.
Gotcha.
I think I can understand.
That's pretty cool. Now, do you find that your sense of humor has often helped in maybe difficult situations where you've had to, kind of come across to somebody, like say you're trying to either share your faith or you're doing like some counseling or something like that? Like, are you able to use your humor in those contexts to help balance things out?
Yeah, I would say so. I think in my life, though, I've never been necessarily the class clown type.
Okay.
Like I have a sense of humor, and I can have jokes, but in everyday life, I'm a little bit more introspective, and because my humor just comes from observation
Okay.
and from a deep like connection with people,
Okay.
So that's where my humor comes from, and that has helped me have entry into people's lives, because when people speak, I listen, I'm empathetic. Those skills is what allows me to really make connections with people, and also what allows me to make a good joke on stage,
Yeah,
because I can have that, perspective.
I see. I get you.
So, so I got a question then. Just before you joined, Randy, Giff was actually asking the question of whether or not the church is, or does the church exclude certain groups?
Okay.
And I'm curious to know what you would say in response to that.
I would say no. The church should, obviously, we're still people, and people tend to be quite honest, be exclusive within groups. It tends to happen. And that's something the church needs to actively fight against, because the word says God wants all men to be saved and come unto a knowledge of the truth. And that's all without exception. So the idea of the church is supposed to be inclusionary and supposed to allow people to have access to it. So in practice, that's not always the case. And that's just being honest. But that's something that the church needs to do better.
So when you say in practice, what are the discrepancies that you see between practice and the?
Yeah. In practice, I would say some churches in general, like the ministry that I grew up in, is pretty multicultural. But I know my parents had some pressure from other Congolese people to go to a Congolese church, to be a part of that. Why are you fraternizing with these white folks at church? We have our own church here, that sort of thing. That's one way that it can be exclusionary.
Yeah.
Sorry, what was that, Joe?
I said those white folks might have been asking the same thing.
Exactly.
So now, yeah.
Go ahead, Giff.
With that friction that was going on, really, like between being with the African church folks and being with the multicultural church environment. Within the multicultural church environment, because we all have experience growing up in multicultural church environments, and I'm wondering if you found that church has ever tokenized Black people or even Black culture at times.
Wow. You guys have real questions. Oh my gosh.
Look at our time, bro.
We came ready.
Wow. Okay. Okay.
I'm sure this is
That's why the name of the show is Unashamed Truth.
Yeah.
Real talk all the way through.
This is
that's a great question. That's a great question. I think, to be quite honest with you, I don't know about tokenizing, but I don't think a lot of churches have used the Blackness enough. And what I mean by that is, is like, if you take Black churches, like maybe in the South, in the U.S., some of the things that make those churches what make them successful is music, the culture, the community that's created in the Black church. Whereas you might go to some other churches where they might have Black congregation, or a huge part of their church might be Black, but they haven't utilized those skill sets. They're still using not so fun music. They might not be utilizing all the the skills of maybe church members who are good at speaking the word, just in a different manner than the church structure that they might see. So I think in that sense, if that makes any sense, they could be utilizing the Blackness within their church a little bit more. But I don't know. Did you have anything in particular when you were thinking of like tokenizing the Blackness in church?
Well, like for example, in my experiences, if let's say we're talking about like outreach to African countries, like with regards to like like giving money to a village or whatever, if there was like someone who's doing that work, then the service will be focused on embracing Black gospel music.
Really?
Yes, I kid you not. And having like Black singers on the stage singing, and those Black singers were there 90% of the year. You know what I mean?
God.
Where's that music 90% of the year, right?
Yeah.
And you have like a church where the congregation is 90% Black.
Wow.
So
well, that's interesting.
And in representation, though.
Yeah. What about all the deacons and the pastor? Are they all Black too? Or is it...
That's exactly where this is going, right? That's exactly where this is going, right? So you've got these congregations.
I didn't even know what's going there. That was just the first question in my mind.
These congregations that are 60, 70, 80% Black, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then you look at the leadership panel.
Yeah.
And it's maybe
it's a cup of milk.
It's like
See, I dabble in stand-up comedy myself.
0 to 10%, are represented. You know what I mean?
Yes. Okay. I like where this is going. All right. I can speak from my experience in the ministry that I'm a part of. It just so happens that I would say maybe 50 or 60%, let's say 60% are French Africans, people who from Cameroon, Congo, they make up a majority of the ministry. And when it comes to being included, I'd say there's more than fair representation. They teach at services. Our productions, when it comes to musical sort of things, are almost always represented there. With regards to the leadership roles, to what you mentioned, most of the people in leadership roles are not people of color, but I would say that's strictly a generational thing. Whereas I'm by far one of the youngest leaders in our ministry, and the leaders that are coming up after me are more representative of the congregation. So it's kind of like it will take time for them to make the decision I made to come and serve in that in those roles, but they need to be encouraged to do so, and we are actively encouraging that because it's obvious that, hey, the people you're serving are like you. They have similar experiences than you. You might be a good leader for them. Does that make sense?
That makes sense.
Joey.
You see that. Sorry, I was going to say, I think that's a little different than the experience, especially Gift, Dwight, myself, and Joey had, because we came up in a church that was a part of a larger umbrella organization. I'm not going to go into specifics to create any enemies. But yeah, and what we noticed is we went to the unofficial Black church. I'll put it that way. When you look at the people who are involved in the music ministries, a lot of Black faces. The choir, Black faces. When you look at the youth, Black faces. Youth pastor, Black. Other pastors, all white. And the challenge we found oftentimes was there were very key moments where the service could be Black. You know what I mean?
Wow.
And key times where it was more homogenous with the leadership. I'll put it that way. You know, so like for instance, I remember we had a speaker, one of the best speakers that would come to our church. You know, and this guy, he was African American. You know, and it was great when he would come to our church and stuff like that. And you know, people would flock to our church, and it was great because the church liked it. You know, high attendance for those services, and it was just like, well, you know, like why don't you just have more Black people involved in the church? You know, like in general. But it didn't seem to be the way things were going. And even I remember like there was tension, you know, because we had back in the day, my brother and I and my cousin and a few other people were part of a hip hop group. And I just remember even like people would get so annoyed with us, you know, like doing hip hop music and stuff. And it was just like, well, this is what we listen to, right? You know, sorry, we're not listening to Hillsongs all day. Like that's just not who we are, you know? And what I find difficult is even like, so I went to the States for 2 years. Came back to Canada, and when I was in the States, I was at a big church in Tampa, and you know we were playing. I mean, the music was all Hillsongs, man. It was all Hillsong stuff, you know. And not that I have a problem with it; it's good worship.
Just explaining what Hillsongs is.
I'm confused.
My bad. So Hillsongs is I guess one of the biggest producers of contemporary Christian music. So like they do a lot of rock, they do a lot of EDM, which is kind of cool. I vibe with EDM, so I'm cool with that. And they're one of the big names in Christian music.
Yes.
Not exactly, very opposite to gospel music as we listen to gospel music, you know. So and what I found is that coming back here, even it's been like, you know, I'm in a church where there's a lot of Black faces, but the music is still very much Hillsongs, very much, you know, and it doesn't necessarily vibe with like, you know, even churches that are very like West Indian in nature, you know what I mean? Oftentimes there's not that feeling that this is a church where there are people of color that attend, you know, and my brother's a worship leader and he's had his wings clipped, you know, when it comes to even his song selection sometimes. So it's like, it's hard to feel like you're free to worship the way that you want to, you know?
Yeah.
And
wow. I'm just writing two things down from what you were saying. The first thing, I think there needs to be an opportunity for those people of whatever their race or whatever to be able to take on the leadership roles. So whatever church you're in, there needs to be a path for those people, whether it's in the area that's predominantly Filipino, whatever it is, those people who are in the church, there needs to be a clear path for them to take those roles of leadership and responsibility. That's the first thing. The second thing is in terms of God's design for the church is that he doesn't want any schism in the church, whether that be from race or income, whatever. It's supposed to be a unified thing. So it's kind of whack to have, okay, today we're going to have our African Day or our Black Day where we're going to do gospel music and this sort of thing. It should just be
Parade
consistent.
Of Nations. I'm sorry.
Parade of Nations. It needs to be like a melange throughout. But the last thing that I find very interesting that you mentioned when you're explaining Hillsong to Joe. Joe, it was you that never heard of Hillsong before?
Yeah.
The thing that I find interesting, and this is a problem I have, okay? Like Christian music, like I don't like when they try to adopt other genres like Hillsong does and most of those other worship music where they're like, we're going to be Christian rock, we're going to be Christian pop, you know? Like Christian music was already its own genre and it was good and it was called gospel. Like it's already its own genre. Let's not try to do other things. Let's stay in our lane. But I think the problem with when people venture off to do those things, it's really a race problem because the Christian music has been predominantly Black and has been predominantly, you know, that group of people.
Can I
Does that make
just
sense?
wait?
No, not you, Terry.
Oh, wait, Dwight has to say something.
Okay.
People are bursting over here.
Go, Dwight.
Dwight has to say something. Sorry, Terry.
Okay, go, gift, then Terry, then me. Go.
No, you
Okay.
go, you go.
Okay. Listen, I gotta I gotta go back. You see, Randy, you're hitting so many of the things, and it's so good. Okay, but first, Joe, you do know who Hillsongs is? It's just been a long time, but we've done Hillsongs for a long time.
The word that wants to come to my lips is vineyard. Is that the same thing? Is that Hillsong vineyard changed to Hillsong?
All that whole thing.
They're all one and together.
Okay, because it was taking like kind of pop rock music and making like a soft version of rock with a light choir like gently underneath.
That whole
If you remember, Shout to the Lord was like the birthplace of Hillsongs for a lot of people.
I could probably all those hymns that we used to play. I could probably like pick up my bass and play them all like right now.
You still know them, okay? But that's besides the point.
Okay, so I didn't realize it's from the same thing.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, that's what it is. That's what it is. You know.
All right, go ahead, Dwight.
But you know, Randy, you hit it right from point one that you wrote down. Right, there needs to be a path for the congregation members to leadership. But here's the thing, and it ties in with what you're saying at the very end. There is that as soon as Mr. Filipino, Mr. African American, Mr. Whoever they are, they go to Bible college, they do that whole thing, they graduate from Bible college, and now they come for a position. Now, say they even have some funding and they start a church. Here's what happens to Mr. Filipino, Mr. African American, and Mr. Other thing. As soon
Can I guess looking in from the outside?
Go ahead.
Do they become the youth pastors?
Either they become the youth, either they are only the youth pastor of the big church in the city, okay? Or as soon as they start a church because they had some funding, they become the black church, the Filipino church, or whatever group,
whatever nationality,
whatever their nationality is, they become that church, right? So the main conglomerate or the main branded church in that community or sector or whatever now refers to them as the Filipino church.
Wow.
Right?
Okay.
So that means
in our experience, we should say in our experience.
In our experience.
Actually, I remember that. I remember referring to the Filipino church.
The Ethiopian church now all of a sudden.
The Ethiopian church assembles here. So now, right, this is the experience, right? So now this is automatically seen as, well, you can't go there. That's a place for just those people, right?
Yes.
So that's exactly now what you're talking about when you're talking about the music, the everything, right? We have this genre, but as soon as black folk touch anything, right, it's immediately branched off from the main category.
Yeah,
I don't think it's like it's something I can't understand. Why?
Yeah, that's a good point.
So what you're saying is white supremacy is so woven into the fabric of society that even church isn't impervious to its reach.
Yeah. Well, like I said a little while back in one of the podcasts, the first ones, the first time I got my first taste of racism was in the church.
Oh wow!
Yeah, my first real palatable taste of racism. I just want to make a little spot here. Gift, I think you need to go, right?
Yeah.
So if we're gonna say goodnight, we're gonna carry on the conversation a little bit because I feel like it needs to go just a little further. And if
I agree.
Those watching with us, if you guys wanna, we're gonna continue this. Stay with us if you want to. So, bye, Gift.
Bye, guys. Thank you so much.
Good seeing you, Gift.
Thank you all. Ciao.
Have a good night.
All right.
Terry, did you have something to add?
Yeah, no. So I was gonna say, I just want to make this little disclaimer because this is something that I saw at a church.
Okay.
Any white pastors listening, please do not sing a Negro spiritual this Sunday. Okay, trying to connect with your black congregation because I saw that happen once, And yo, you want to talk about cringeworthy moments? That was the most
Yeah.
cringeworthy moment I experienced. And Sunday night in front of a church full of black ladies, old school militant church black ladies that are there the Sunday night because they finished cooking dinner early and now they're gonna go to church. My man busts out Swing Low Sweet Chariot, and I never I was like, listen, man, that was a faux pas of faux pas.
Terry,
I've heard that one.
That's an exact reason why representation does matter. Because
Exactly.
if that church just had maybe one senior person who was black, would be able to say, that's probably not a good idea. You might want to hold off. Your heart might be pure, but it's not going to look good. You know what I mean?
That's the thing. That's the one thing I'm going to say. It was coming from the most sincere place in this guy's heart. I know that he was being sincere. I know he was being kind. He wasn't doing it in a malicious way or nothing. But the problem is the perception. Mm-hmm. And this is the same issue that exists, when we look at H&M coming out with the cutest monkey, and putting that little hoodie on a black kid.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, if you don't have people of color within the realms of your decision making, you're going to make terrible decisions.
Yeah.
And now he's lucky that this was not the social media era in which that happened. But if that was the social media era,
that would have been viral.
Yo, for real. For real.
I would have found it and shared it.
Yeah. Exactly. You know what I mean?
Be all over Black Twitter.
For real. So we talked about tokenizing. We talked about now. Can you guys maybe talk about an experience where you felt maybe unwelcome as a person of color, as a black person in church? I kind of shared mine with my experience on racism.
No, I don't have one because most of the churches I've attended have been predominantly black.
Yeah. But maybe on the flip side, have you seen maybe? Okay.
Yeah. But this is Dwight's thing though, because when Dwight mentioned about when anything where there's a majority of black people becomes labeled black, and it's like that becomes his own little thing.
Yeah.
I've seen that happen within the ministry I'm a part of, where, like I said, it's predominantly French Africans, but we do want to do outreach to whoever. When we go to speak to people, we're just like, hey, we believe God's word. We believe it's going to help you. Why don't you come to one of our fellowship meetings, that sort of thing, right? And then they show up to fellowship and they're like, oh, everyone here is black. And sometimes they just assume that, oh, this is like a black church now, or I'm not going to be comfortable because I'm the only white person. And it's just like, well, this is what being a minority in Canada is like. Now you're the minority. Get over it.
Like, you can't dare to feel like what we feel like all the time for 1 hour. Okay.
I know, right? So that's kind of like, and I don't think the people in the church are putting off some negativity towards them, but it's just, I don't know why, kind of like what Joe mentioned in terms of white supremacy being in a lot of different parts of society, they themselves aren't able to be comfortable in a group where they are the minority, which is kind of whack. It's like, get over it.
It's just because they're not used to being the minority.
They're not.
If you're never used to it, it must be a real uncomfortable pressure.
Yeah, it's
probably not comfortable for a lot of us too, but we just have no choice but to
deal with it. We've acclimatized, right?
You don't even think about it.
No, I'll never forget this. This was an experience. I don't know if I ever shared this story with you, Terry, but a long time ago, man, back in our youth group days, we had, like the church we came from was, again, a majority black church, just not in the leadership, right? And we had a black pastor and so on. Great. So now, the kids, the youth group is starting to grow, and it's starting to get more and more popular to be in the youth group, as a part of this church, and a lot of youth are coming in from CJEP and coming in from XYZ, whatever, and it's good.
Mm-hmm.
Great. So now, we had events where we would cross into Toronto, and it would be like groups of churches from all over the province of Ontario, of Quebec would come and congregate at different like conventions and stuff, we would call it, and we would have a great time. So now, we would meet people from those groups, and we would invite them to do special numbers or special nights, special worship emphasis, whatever, on certain nights. So anyways, this particular group came in, and it was a black group, and we gave them the floor one night, right?
Okay.
And they came in, and, so the soundtrack of the evening was very hip hop heavy, very R&B heavy, right? And I remember this majority black youth group, man, was like, "Whoa!" Like, man, we're not killing it with hill songs tonight. We just spice. So everybody's getting ready to groove a little. And I'll never forget, because this was the first time I had experienced it. Because up until that point, right? Because we're used to being always playing the minority role, right?
Mm-hmm.
Up until that point, I had never dealt with the reverse of it, right? So now these, two white kids, they come up and they're like, "Oh man, we're gonna have to listen to this all night, man, for real, man." And I was like, kind of like, Lord, man. I was like, yo, wait a second, we're up here representing music that's not, look at this whole group, right? This whole group, like 80, like you're talking about a group of over 100 kids, and maybe 90 of them are black, right? So you're like, it's like, wait a second.
And these two guys are like, "You're not gonna listen to the stuff I want to hear."
Yeah, like my mind was blown. I did not anticipate that could possibly come out of like their mouths that night. It was just one night, and this was at the beginning of the night. Like they didn't even sit through the event yet.
Wow.
So that's when I realized, oh man, this runs deep. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
This is a conversation that people are not even ready to have, because they're not willing to acknowledge that it even exists.
Yeah.
Yeah, I get you.
I felt like for issues like that too, one of the messages that discouraged me a lot growing up was, if ever I tried to raise race issue with, like, I don't bring up names, but leadership in my life at the time in those days, it was usually kind of like downplayed. And it was kind of like, well, look, if everybody's just focusing on Jesus the way they should, the racism thing will just kind of fall into place. Like it'll trickle down into just focus on the source, And I used to feel like, well, no, I think we need to actually take some active steps to change some things. And it'd be like, well, yeah, the active step is to just get everybody to focus on Jesus and stop focusing on race and things that divide us and divisions and stuff like that. Just focus on the top, and everything should fall into place. But you never actually saw it play out that way. It's just always the thing that some people would use to try to get you to stop talking about it.
Yeah, it's easier to act like a problem doesn't exist, right? And then you dismiss it and you carry on your life like nothing's wrong. And it's unfortunate, because the truth of the matter is that people are suffering because of these things. You know what I mean? And ignoring a problem does not negate it from it. It doesn't erase it from existence. So I feel that. I feel that. But oh man, this is I think we'll have to continue this conversation another time for sure. We'll have to have both of you guys back and really talk a little bit more, because I'm liking the vibe here.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. Cool, man. So hey, before you take off, Randy, do you have a Facebook page, YouTube channel, anything that you'd like to share with those watching the podcast tonight?
Oh, yeah, you could actually hit me up on Instagram. My Instagram is my name, Randy Comey,
Okay.
Komi.
Okay.
And there you'll see mostly my stand-up stuff. But if you ever want to reach out for ministry stuff or any questions, you can hit me up on there on my Instagram. So that's Randy, Randy.
Yeah.
And then my family name is Komi, Komi.
Mhm.
And I'm free to answer any questions and just help out.
Cool. And Joey, you're still working on your musical projects? I saw you post the other day.
Oh yeah, well, I still don't really have anything to promote except the Bandcamp page, just Joseph Hackle.
Okay, cool. Awesome stuff. So thanks for joining us tonight, Randy. No worries about. I know you were tied up with the church meeting. That's totally understandable. And we'll have
Sorry
to
about
definitely. No, don't worry about it, man. We'll have to resume this conversation at another date. We'll set something up and we'll make sure that we can continue this talk a little bit about church culture.
Yeah, you guys got me amped up. Let me know when we'll talk again, okay?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks again, Joey, as well, for being with us tonight, and thanks for sharing your story.
Oh,
And
thanks for having me.
yeah,
Giving me a seat at the table.
No worries, anytime.
Right.
And thank you for
Bless
everybody
you.
for watching tonight. Thanks for staying with us a little bit longer, and we'll be with you guys next week. All right.
All right.
Peace.
Peace.